So I've got Bill Douglas here with me, and we've been talking about the Global Transformation Project and the work of Dr. Emoto, and so much more. And we're just carrying on with this. So I've been flashing another Dr. Emoto card, a crystal beauty of the sun, which is linking to the Here Comes the Sun track that we played on an episode of Chi Time. And you were just saying, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as I was writing, finishing the new second edition of the Gospel of Science, so that it could come out on January 1st, 2022, was, I had referred to Dr. Emoto's work in the first edition, but then as I was going through the process, I found, other supporting research that I had mentioned earlier.
Yes. Okay.
Massive international studies that backed up that human consciousness affects the crystallization of water. So it supported Dr. Emoto's work. But as I was going through this and doing the research, I realized there were a lot of attack pieces on the internet of Dr. Emoto. And that disturbed me greatly. So what I began to realize was that there's like this whole kind of block of media. Wikipedia seems to be part of it a lot of times, but there's other media sources that have this real kind of mechanistic view of the world and science, which really doesn't fit into a quantum physics world. It's kind of outdated, but they hang on to it with a death grip. And they attack anybody who talks about, consciousness affecting physical matter, which, in a quantum world, this would be a normal thing to study, to look at. And the data is out there, to show that this is a very real thing. Consciousness affects matter. It affects other people's consciousness. This is all done science. But I had, as I was finishing the book, I was talking about it a lot in my Tai Chi classes locally. And I had a couple of students that were in the class that had been in there for years. And I was shocked because they stopped me after class. And one of them said, you have to stop talking about this consciousness affecting matter research. And I said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, it's not real. What I eventually figured out was they were getting all their science off Wikipedia. And, I don't know why Wikipedia does this, but they do it. And they've ruined some really good scientists. They've really done some disservices to some really good scientists. And so I ended up writing like a whole section in the book about this issue, because the thing is that, you can give people a whole book of science, like this new second edition of Gospel of Science. But, if they go on Wikipedia and they say, oh, there's something in there that you shouldn't pay attention to or whatever,
they'll just jump
a
on
lot
that,
of
won't
people
they?
just put it off. Yeah, so I was compelled to write this whole section, based on Dr. Emoto's experience, because he was treated so unfairly in the media. You'll see in the book if you've probably seen it already.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's how do we manage that? I mean, we're always going to be challenged. There's always going to be that, and it's how we integrate what it is we're doing in a way that sort of piques curiosity in other people. Like, well, why do you, I'm not making this up. So you've got your coming in, but I've got this. Is there somewhere where we could be curious about each other's processes and have a kind of dialogue about this? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's where we should be headed.
Yeah.
And I believe we will get there. Yeah, it's going to take time. But I had to address this issue because otherwise people, they get played by a game that they don't understand the game. And so I had to point out, okay, there's a game being played here. And it's not a healthy scientific game, because science, the very concept of science is that you're open. If you have a phenomenon, you try to figure out what that phenomenon is and what made it happen. You don't just say, oh, that's not real, so we can't study it. That's bizarre, and it's unscientific in the extreme. And so but so where do we want to go? Well, we want to be open. We want to look at all this. And so what I try to do with the book, again, the new second edition, it's very important that you remember new second edition of the Gospel of Science, is that it's hundreds of pages of science, but it's told in a story form, so it's not.
Okay. I was going to say might be a bit much for some of us, but I think it's important that you've got it in there, because it means it's a go-to place, and it's all like cross-reference, and you've got the links and everything, so it's like you're not making this up.
That's right.
You've collated it. You've brought it all into one place, which is really good.
And that's exactly why I did that, so that people would have a go-to source. They could see the science. Once you see the science, you know that consciousness affects global consciousness, and you know that consciousness can affect the physicality of.
So What do you think the block is then? Do you think it's like, uh, is it the external internal thing where, I don't know, I'm just getting a feeling for
Well,
why is it blocked by some people and
well,
others are open?
well, I mean, I think part of it is, and this is true throughout history, and that is that, any way of looking at the world that empowers the individual is tends to be frowned on by the powers that be, in any age, in
You
any
said it.
age. And, like, for example, in the book, I get into, early Christianity had many forms, and most of the forms of the early Christianity were mystical. And what I mean by that is the idea that we all have a connection to the divine, and that's what Jesus preached. He preached,
Yes.
you all have you have a connection to the divine. Everybody, all of us. We're all children of God. And,
Mm.
so there was this whole kind of Gnostic, and there's Gnosticism is not really something you can define, but one of the defining aspects is that we all have a direct connection to the divine. Now, in Islam, it's Sufism. So the Sufis, they're the aspect of Islam that is metaphysical or spiritual, self-empowered is another way of saying it. And you have the same thing. You have the Kabbalah in Judaism, and so all the major religions. I mean, some of them actually embrace this. I think probably Buddhism, Hinduism, closer more than others, but they all have their kind of dogmatic aspect as well. But they have these elements where that taught that we all have a direct connection to the divine, and that we can tap into the divine, and that we can also we can become expressors of the divine. And and when we go into that alpha state or that flow state, it opens us up to that possibility.
Mm. Definitely, and that's why I feel it's also part of what you're willing to choose to focus on, because what you focus on expands. So
Hmm.
if you're going to be focusing on, I need the outside world to tell me what is right, as
Yeah.
opposed to the connection within, as you say, the divine connection that is this sort of internal compass of just sense and feeling. They said truth and compassion again, isn't it? If something
Hmm.
doesn't chime right, it's not right.
Hmm.
And it is that call to personal responsibility about health now as well. And
Hmm.
as we were saying earlier, it's like that the whole healthcare, the preventative healthcare. Again, this would be great if it was part of public education, like how to
Yeah.
take care of yourself properly. Just
Absolutely.
how to cook and how to clean, and but also how to let you make, which is what you're doing with the Global Transformation Project, encouraging the youngsters to come into that, almost that defragging of all the mind funk. We got so
Yeah.
over distracted, there's so much going on, and you just need that kind of, people do defrag their computers, so surely your
Yes.
internal computer needs that as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, there's no more powerful thing that we could do, as like a global movement of people that want a better planet, than to facilitate children, public school children all over the planet learning how to access that alpha state. Because when you go into, if anybody out there is regular meditators, you know what I'm talking about. But if you're not, if you're a sporadic meditator or whatever, just get a calendar and just force yourself to, meditate 20 to 30 minutes every day. And you'll start to see that when you go into that state, that's where you feel good. That's where you feel safe. That's the place where you can
Yes,
go to
yes.
get this, this whole kind of rebooting of your computer, like you were talking about. And the science is all there. It shows. It makes us smarter. It makes us kinder. It makes us more compassionate. It makes us more creative. It makes us multi-dimensional thinkers that can solve problems in much more elegant and less fragmented ways. This is all science. It's all backed up by science. And so,
Yeah.
when I created the Global Transformation Project.org website, I put the end notes of all this science from the book in that website with live links, so that people would have instant access, so that they would be authorities on this science, and they would also understand how the so-called debunkers try to make you feel stupid when you quote this science. And so for people to find their own dignity, and that's what happens when you go into the
Mm.
meditative state as well. You lose that feeling that your worth depends on what people out there have to say about you, because that's not your worth. When we go into these states, when we connect with the ocean of existence, which is what happens when we go into these states, these alpha states, not only do we get all these benefits, but we remember that we're much bigger, much larger
Mm.
than the way that we're defined by the world around us. And that's an important thing for us as we go forward as human beings at all levels of our lives. And like you keep saying, we have to tune into what feels congruent with us, because at our very core, it's compassion. Compassion is the very foundation of the universe. I mentioned an unpublished study from the Paralabs at Princeton that one of the researchers talked about. His name escapes me, Adam Curry. He was there in Paris at the time. And anyway, what they did was they put a random event generator controlled light in the center of a room. It was a grow light, and in a dark room. And so that was the only light source. And so it was random event generator controlled. So it should have ended up in each corner 25% of the times. There was 4 corners in the room. And but they put a living plant in one corner of the room. And what they found was this random event generator light spent a lot more time shining over in the corner of the room where there was life. And so this compassion, this nurturing, when we tune into our source, we know in every fiber, every DNA strand of our being, because I talked about that science earlier, when we're on the right track. And the right track is always compassion. It's always compassionate solutions, because that's what the universe is made of. And so as this science becomes more available, and the way that happens is we all spread it,
Right.
because
Yeah.
you can't depend on CNN, MSNBC, and Fox
No.
News and
No,
BBC.
they're not gonna.
They're not going to do it. Yeah, they're all involved in fear-based media,
Yeah.
and there's reasons. It gets more viewers. It's all scientific. It creates stress chemicals. It gets us to habitually watch because we get addicted to stress chemicals. I get into all this in the book. And but we can rise above that. Every time we go into these coherent states, it's an act of global evolution, because we're not just affecting ourselves, we're joining with hundreds of millions of people around the planet that are going into these
Whatever.
states as well.
And that's why, often at the end of a really robust Qigong practice, there's the connection that you have in your circle, whether it's online or in person, and that that you're filled up with this abundant, gorgeous life force energy. And then there's just a wish to want to all of you combine together and produce a ball of white light chi with hope, and you just send that out into the world just because you feel like it. It's like,
Yeah,
why wouldn't you?
yeah, 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 yeah. You shine from spreading the shine. And and
Yes.
that's one thing. Anybody who does any of the big five,
Yeah.
yoga, meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong, mindfulness,
Music.
we all know that we're much easier to get along with than we were before we discovered these things. And one of my favorite
Yes.
quotes was from one of my Tai Chi students, and he said, Bill, he said, since I've been doing the Tai Chi and the meditation, he goes, I don't flip nearly as many people off on the freeway as I used to.
Well, that's a
And
good thing, isn't it? Like,
yeah, but it kind of turns all that on its head. And so
yeah.
and so it's so exciting because the science shows that when we go into the alpha state, which all the big five can produce, it increases the physical size and function of the empathy and compassion parts of the brain, and it physically shrinks the stress fear parts of the brain. And I
Right.
think it's because when we go into the states, we merge with the field of existence, and we remember that we're
Yes.
connected to everything. Physics shows us this, all this science shows us this. And so that's why compassion is the foundation of the universe, and why Darwin said that's what lifted humanity up to our place in society. And so compassion is what's going to lead us out of all this stuff.
Yeah.
And so how do we stay true to compassion? Meditation. Now, in your meditation, the kind that we're talking about is all science-based, because we want to get into public education. But you can do it. Each individual can do it in their own way. So you can bring your own spirituality into it, your own religion, whatever. As long as it's healing and it's accepting and it's compassion-based, it's going to have these effects. And that's what's going to lead us out of this thing. It's very nebulous.
I
The
don't know.
Global
I think
Transformation
it's
Project
more
is
and
a
more
physical
people.
thing, but
Yeah.
it's much bigger than that. It's happening on
Exactly.
many levels.
And like just like you called in all the Tai Chi and Qigong players in the World Tai Chi Qigong Day, you're calling in all the consciousness workers, and there's thousands of them, millions probably, and there's some really amazing teachers that are on this track too. And if you can unify all of them, but I was just feeling, as you were saying, that connection in what is it? This compassion. I think it's self-compassion is where it begins.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. And then
gotta.
we realize that we're connected to everything.
And then but it's that, how many folk have been trained through the nature or nurture to give themselves a hard time,
Mm-hmm.
and when you realize that, you realize, what, I'm running an old pattern here. Actually, this was taught to be me by my Auntie Mary, who always used to do that, or
Mm-hmm.
whoever. You pick up these patterns without questioning them when you're younger, and then you get
Mm-hmm.
into your meditation space. You've got a bit of space between your thoughts, and you're going, hang on a minute, is this pattern mine? Or if it
Mm-hmm.
is mine, is it still useful? Maybe it was useful back in the day. I'm
Mm-hmm.
having a little chat with this pattern. I'm really not
Yeah.
happy with it. And this, I think, Dr. Emoto's work really helps with this. How you speak to yourself
Mm-hmm.
resonates in your waters, and it's like,
Yes. Yes.
that's why it's important. The self-talk,
Well,
really
and then
important.
also you start to see why when your grandparents may have, said grace before they ate, all of a
Yes.
sudden there's a scientific reality to this because
Okay.
we realize that if we bless our food. Now, I'm not saying, if anybody's agnostic or atheist, don't get me wrong, you don't have to be religious to do this. This is
Not at all.
science.
Yes.
But it's really interesting because when you bless your food, when you're eating it, when you're grateful for it, you salivate more, you taste it more. That starts to break down the food. When you swallow it, it's more digestible. I mean, all this is science. All
Mm,
this consciousness stuff is
mm,
science.
mm.
There's no woo-hoo stuff here. This is all science.
It's getting down to what happens in each and every one of the cells and the little mitochondria and the DNA. That if you eat wholesome food that's been made with love, and
Mm-hmm.
you've had time to do it, and you share it with others, or maybe if you're on your own, you share it with yourself, and kind of just being grateful, as you say, for that, or Mother Earth for growing it, for whoever's brought it to you.
Mm-hmm.
If you can imbue or imbibe that, as well as where your thoughts are going, then you're starting to affect your cells. You're reprogramming actually yourself, aren't you? Because we change all our cells every 7 years, isn't it? Completely,
Yes.
and the skin
Yeah,
cells are triggered from
almost
that.
completely. Yeah.
So we're not the same cellular makeup as we were 7 years ago, which means, who is this? Who am I? Is that question, like, who am I really? I'm not really this body, am I?
I'm being reformed constantly, and as
Yes,
is the
yes,
planet.
yes,
And
yes,
that's
yes.
part of the facade that's starting to shatter, is this idea that the planet is just set on this track. It's kind of a dismal track. But the truth of it is the possibility and the potential for humanity is massive. And you were talking about when food is produced with love, and one of the things that I get into in the book is the economic disparity in the world,
Yeah.
and it's just gotten just profoundly worse, over the last 2 years. And the average person is just struggling so hard just to make ends meet. And so what I throw out in the book is, let's envision a new future, because anything's possible if we envision it.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I envision is that we create a society, and economics shows us that's the way that you create the strongest economy, the strongest society, is by having less income disparity. Where you just
Yeah.
have all the resources in one place and everybody else is just barely making it. And we can create a society where people can have livable lives, where they can have a home and they can have security and they don't have to be in fear all the time. And then when they work at a restaurant, if they work at a restaurant, if that's their calling, and they prepare food, that food's going to have a whole different energetic thing.
Yeah, of
It's like I always look
course.
in the eyes of people that hand me my coffee,
Mm,
or
mm,
whatever,
mm.
because it's just like I'm
Awesome.
so grateful that they're so kind to me, because I know they're going through a lot of stuff in their lives.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's the compassion piece,
Right.
and that, we it's a miracle that all of us exist anyway, and I think that's very easy to forget, and we
Yeah.
take it for granted until maybe a loved one dies, and then we think, oh, hang on, I'm actually not going to be around forever, and it
Yeah.
kind of puts things in perspective, and you wake up a little bit more as well. But
Mhm.
it is that responsibility for taking care of yourself, that I think there's a certain amount of laziness in the world, where we've been trained as a society. Western society is pretty lazy, really, when it comes
Well,
to looking.
I think the media
Yeah,
plays that
I
up.
think so. I'm
Uh,
not saying it's
but I
their
know,
fault,
but
but
I
it's
know,
how it
like in
been
the case,
trained by media and education. It's been
yeah,
very
I'm not sure that
irresponsible.
people are that lazy. I think they're looking for meaningful things to do in their lives. I think a lot of them are very tired of
Yes,
doing,
we're
meaningless tasks,
exhausted. Yeah.
just to just to eke out a bare living. But I know statistically, I think I actually mentioned this in the book, but in the United States right now, the average, workers are working harder than any industrialized country in the world, and that includes Japan. And I remember when I was growing up, we used to feel sorry for the Japanese workers because they had to work so hard.
Yeah,
Well,
I
Americans are
know.
working harder than they are. But if you watch American media, if you watch CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, whatever, they'll convince you that Americans are just so lazy. They don't want to work. Oh, they don't want to work.
Actually, I don't. I think lazy. Maybe it's not. It's weary. It's when you mention. I think there's a weariness of like, oh,
I agree with
what's the
that.
point? I'm just so tired. Everything's coming in from all these angles. I don't get any space to myself. I'm just like, I don't even know what to do. It's all
Yeah.
just hopeless. That I really feel for people that are
Yes.
struggling like that and don't know where the way out is. And what we're suggesting is that your internal space can become a place of real salvation and connection. You don't have to be religious to do this. It's just
Yeah.
that honoring that the soulful side of you, or that part of you that, I don't know. I always find that when I feel I'm here on behalf of my ancestors, that kind of helps me connect with them all. And I think,
Mhm.
oh, I'm here because they all succeeded. They all, in
Mhm.
some way, and I'm part of their success. And I kind of feel them in the back of me, kind of spurring me on, going, "Go on, you can get through this hurdle. We've got you." And that's just
Yeah.
that's really helped me through some of the difficult times in my life.
That is really beautiful. And I have a meditation that I teach in my classes where I talk about that. I say we're the vortex. All the hopes and
Yeah,
dreams and struggles of all those people in the past that, ultimately came to the point where they created us.
yeah,
And right here, we're the pinnacle of the vortex of
so far.
all those hopes, dreams, worries, fears, and everything. And here we are. What are we going to produce? What
Yes,
world are we going to create?
yes,
And is it going to be, is it going to be a better world? And when we go through hard times, there's a crossroads we walk through, and that crossroads that I found is that we can look at our hard life and we can go, well, I did it. Everybody else ought to be able to do it. But there's another way we can look at it. We can look at it like, man, I sure don't want anybody to go through that.
yeah,
What
yeah,
I just went
really.
through. I would like to create a better world. And we're in a position to
Yeah,
actually do that. And so, when you talk about going internal, that's, you get that gratitude state of consciousness. So wherever you are, you become more grateful for whatever you have. But at the same
mm,
time,
mm,
you're becoming more empathetic and compassionate for what everybody else is going through. And you start to realize that we're all going through all these things together. We're, the kind of the struggles and doubts that we're facing. It's not just us. There's like 7 billion people on the planet
yes,
that are going through the same things. And so, and the mind, the meditation, the alpha state, these things, they just keep welding that reality into us that we're all a connected whole. And
mm,
it's a real physical reality. The physics and behavioral science shows that.
We are part of the whole. I've got another Dr. Emoto card here. I've got the love for humanity. So let's just have a little look at that. Looks like such a jewel, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's really
Really
beautiful.
gorgeous. Did you meet him?
No, no, I wished I could have. Yeah, but in the chapter that I put in the book, the first thing that I said is, I'm going to do what the media should have done to you instead of what they did do to you. And that is offer
Oh,
you a deep bow of thank you for what you did, for the research that you did.
absolutely. Um, I did meet him.
Oh, did you really?
I
Oh, how
did
exciting.
in 2013. And one of the very first interviews I did, I was like,
Oh
it
my.
wasn't
Wow. What
particularly
a,
good one, but yeah, it was amazing to be in his presence, and he had a real lightness to him and like a humor and the depth. And he was speaking Japanese, had a beautiful interpreter with him. And how everything, it was this cadence and this dance, but this compassion and the connection. And yeah, what a beautiful man,
yeah.
really.
Yeah. I think I opened my book with a quote from Nikola Tesla. And I'm kind of paraphrasing it, but it was uh, the day that science embraces non-physical phenomena, and then I put in brackets consciousness because that's what he was talking about. That is when science will advance more in one decade than they have in the whole history of science. And and so I feel like Dr. Emoto, and I also wrote a letter to Dr. Nelson from the Global Consciousness Project, and I told him the same thing. And I said, I think history will look back at you guys being the pioneers of this whole new level of science that just is just going to take us way beyond where we are right now. And they're not getting the recognition. They get it. They get attacked in popular culture. And it's not science based. It's just character assassination, stupid things. But I just wanted to know that at least one person gets the breadth and the depth, and and I may get it in a way bigger than they get it because of that Tesla quote. But I truly believe that.
Yeah, and the more of us that have these kind of conversations and go, oh, great, and what bit of the jigsaw do you know? And also I think that thing about when you've had an experience that is very real for you, and nobody can tell you that didn't happen.
Right.
It's like, and I would suggest it's good to journal it so you remember it as well, because
absolutely,
that's our own science going on inside us when we have experiences like that, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Journal those experiences, because the world will try to convince you that it didn't happen. And if I hadn't written and rewritten the experiences that I've had over the decades, because my whole thing started with an extraordinary consciousness experience in my mid-20s. I kind of alluded to a bit of it before. I went through a period in about a little more than a year where my mother passed away, and then about 6 months later my father passed away, and then about 6 months later my youngest son went into a coma, and he ended up passing away a month later. And it just wrecked me. I started crawling inside a bottle, and it was just I didn't see any point. But fortunately, I had started mind-body practices, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, mostly Tai Chi and Qigong, a couple of years before that. And so when I was going through this, when I was going through those deaths, I wasn't doing any of it. I was just sinking like a rock. But then over time, when I got tired of, drinking and being depressed, I had that lifeline, and I was able to, have something to pull, and, and then, able to achieve that alpha state. And then one night I had an extraordinary consciousness experience, and I'm happy to tell you about it if you're interested.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. Thank you.
Well, what happened was it started off with like a kind of a childlike thing. I had gone through this massive depression and loss of faith and everything. And so I did something that I hadn't done since I was a little kid, because when I was a little kid, I grew up in the Lutheran church, and I went to Sunday school, Bible school, all that stuff. And but I had drifted away from the church. It's like there were too many questions they couldn't answer for me. I was looking for answers. And so I drifted away. But that night, it's like life had driven me to my knees. And so I did something I hadn't done since I was a child, and I got down on my knees on the edge of the bed, and I folded my hands, and I said, I need to know why I'm here. Why are we here? I'm not getting it. I'm not getting it at all. And then I laid down in bed, and I started meditating, and I fell asleep. And at 3 a.m., I remember it was 3 a.m. in the morning, I suddenly woke up, and I wasn't in bed. I was sitting on the end of my bed. I have no idea how I got there. I'm sitting upright on the end of my bed, and this voice, it was like a intelligence. It was just as real as looking at you, but I couldn't see it. It was, but I knew it was there, and it was communicating with me. And anyway, it said, I am about to show you what life could be like. Wow. And then it touched me right in the center of my brain, and man, this light, if you've ever really gone into the flow in a meditation where you just kind of drifted in a huge way, like a wave, like you got caught in a wave or something, it was like that times a million. And my brain, just this light just expanded, and then it touched me in the center of my heart, and same thing. And then instantly these two lights were the same thing, and it was just expanding through my room. And then I saw the ceiling of my house, of my bedroom, rushing at me. And then I saw the slats in the attic as I was going through the attic. And then I looked down, and I could see my house in California shrinking. I could see the California coastline. And then I saw the planet Earth down there and the moon over there. And, a million things happened. It would take me hours to explain everything that happened. But it was just like I just had this huge feeling of limitless potential and compassion and just absolute love. No, unconditional love. None of the little stuff that I had done in my life that I thought was so horrible.
Yeah.
None of that mattered. It was just
No.
absolute love, not just for me, but for everybody on the whole planet. I could feel everybody on the whole planet. And I came out of this knowing that everybody on the planet is all going through the same things. We have the same hopes, the same fears, all this stuff. We're worried about our children or our grandchildren or our brothers or sisters or mothers or fathers, whatever. All these things we're going through, we're all going through this together.
Yes.
And that just changed me forever. And
I
then
bet.
when I came out of it, I knew I couldn't go to sleep, and my wife was just snoozing away. And so I came into the kitchen in my underwear, and I'm just kind of standing there going, what am I going to do? And there was a pen and paper on the counter. And whatever this voice was, that had communicated with me before and told me, I'm about to show you what life could be like. It kind of got me to look at the pen and paper, and it said, write. And so I started writing, and I was
Yes.
writing incessantly for months. And it was, what I ended up writing, having a big stack of, was stories about what people are going through all over the
Yeah.
planet. And also a lot of poetry, which I'd never written poetry before. And
Okay.
then also a lot of stories about children's innocence and what that pure innocence has to offer the planet at this time in history. That is just really important.
And it needs protecting.
That's right, in all of us. And that's where, when we go into the alpha state, we're
Right.
protecting it. We're keeping the fire kindled every time we go in there. When we let go,
Yeah.
of all the
Yeah.
things of man, and we connect with the source, where we just drift and we lose ourselves in that field. And there's a lot of ways to get there, but it's that alpha state, that alpha
Yeah.
brainwave state.
Theta,
And
alpha, theta.
and so we can all keep that going. But anyway, what happened was, eventually, I was a data clerk at the time, and I just got to the point where I just thought, this is stupid. I was spending all my time writing. And so my big plan when I got home from work that night was to come home, change clothes, go to the sports bar on the corner, and drink as many ice cold schooners of beer as I could get down. And that was my game plan.
Okay.
And then when I was walking out the door, I got a call from one of my sisters in Kansas. She never called me the whole time I lived in California, so that was weird. And so I picked up the phone. I was going to the bar, but I came back, picked up the phone. Something said, pick up the phone. So I did. And it was my sister. And she said, Mom came to me in a dream last night. So this is really weird. Our mother had
Wow.
died a few, months before. And
Yeah.
so this is really weird to hear this from this sister, because we didn't have these kind of conversations. And she goes, Mom came to me in a dream last night. And she said, she took me into a pure white room. And in the center of the white room was a stack of white papers. And she started flipping through the papers. And she said, look what Junior's been doing. And my knees started shaking, because nobody knew that I had been writing. Nobody knew I had this stack of paper on my desk. And so then I thought, okay, I need to ask her if she knows what was on the papers, because that'll tell
Okay.
me if
Yeah.
this is a fluke. Now, I almost didn't want to ask her, because it was feeling so good thinking that my mom had been watching what I'd been doing, because I was losing faith in it, right? And so I didn't want to screw that up. But at the same time, I'm a science guy. I have to
Yeah.
find it.
You have to know. Yeah.
So I asked her. So I said, okay, what was on the papers? And she goes, God, there was so much. She goes, I don't remember. And then all of a sudden she goes, wait a minute. She goes, I remember there was a lot of poems. And so then my knees start shaking again, right?
Yeah. A bit
And
more.
then she goes, and I remember there were stories about what people are going through. Different people are going through.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
she said, and there were stories about children's innocence and how important that is for the future of the planet.
Oh my gosh.
And man, I had to grab the bed. It was like my knees were they weren't supporting me anymore, And
Wow.
so needless to say, I didn't go to the bar that night. I kept on writing. Now, I'm not
Well
saying I haven't
done.
gone to bars over these 40 years since that happened. I have, but those aren't my peak moments. My peak moments are when I'm here.
Yes, yes. Oh, wow, Bill, thank you for sharing that. That was really precious and so poignant. And the energy when you're speaking, it really affects my energy field as well. That it's so precious what we have as a human, but as a spiritual being having a human experience, and this expansion that you speak around. When we do our qigongs and we take our awareness out to the edges of the universe, and then we coming back in, it is really like remembering that we do have this expansive quality to us, and it's not all about being contracted and keeping ourselves small, and because it's just not healthy.
Yeah.
And it is like the breath, isn't it? That we need to have both, don't we? A bit like the yin
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
the
that's right. Yeah, you got to have that human experience, but then we
yes,
got to we got to bring that in constantly.
yeah.
And I actually wrote the very first poem that I'd ever written, that really, ever really written that night. It was like the first thing that I wrote. And what I realized looking back was that it wasn't about me, because I always had kind of a weird feeling about it, because when you're writing, you think it's me. But, as I wrote over the months, I realized that when I was really flowing, it wasn't me. I was like, I was
Yes,
taking
exactly.
dictation. I was like
Yes,
writing for,
yes.
whatever this voice was that had
And
come that night.
and how many other creative people say this too? They just
Yeah,
get in the zone and you flow with it.
took
It's
me a long time to figure that out, that it wasn't me, that the really good stuff wasn't me. But it's a real short poem. I can tell it to you really quick because I think it has
okay.
import for what we're talking about. It went like this. Uh, and I ended up calling it the messenger, because I thought of that being, that made all this happen, as the messenger.
Mm.
And anyway, so the poem goes, I have come to heal this world, to show men what they already know, to make the obvious apparent and drive common sense home, until the anvil of consciousness shatters beneath the anvil of that sense. And from that shattered anvil, a simple steely truth shall be forged, that when one of us suffers, so do we all.
Mm. And when one of us heals, so do we all. That's
All
beautiful.
connected.
And I'm just going to bring round, just to sort of round this off, was we right at the beginning when we first started chatting about your mom, how you got into forming the World Tai Chi Qigong Day, and how you'd given your mother a copy of the Tao Te Ching, and then she'd left a note in it after she'd died, and she'd said, I wish I'd had time to do more meditation. Is that right? Just speaking to anyone who's listening or watching, that if you think, oh my gosh, I wish I'd done this before,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? You can do it now.
Absolutely. I mean, after doing World Tai Chi Day, that was like 20 years, over 20 years ago. And, I got to a point where World Tai Chi Day, it takes care of itself. I mean, everybody
Yeah,
around the planet knows it's last Saturday of April.
we all
So it's like,
know.
I don't really need to organize it. I mean, I still write newsletters, I want to stay in touch with everybody and do what I can. But, I mean, I just got to the point where, I knew that I wasn't really an essential part of that. And then, I just kind of thought, okay, well, that's good. We did that, and that's done. And then what happened was, towards the end of the pandemic, I got really sucked into watching mainstream news. I was just sitting in front of my TV, because, we had a shutdown. I didn't have classes or
Yeah,
anything.
yeah,
And so I was doing what a lot of people were doing. And I was just watching the news, and it was just increasingly screeching and fear-based, and
such a
and
feeling.
divisive, just dividing people in so many ways and frightening people. And I just got to a point where I had an epiphany, and I said, that's it, I'm done. And I did exactly the same thing 20 years ago when after I had that extraordinary consciousness experience. I turned off the TV, stopped
Yeah,
taking the newspaper. I just walked away
yeah,
from all the things, man. I just
yeah,
immersed myself in quantum or alpha state consciousness.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
all I did,
And
going for walks, sitting by the beach or whatever. And then all of a sudden, man, I just had this, wow, the Global Transformation Project. Why
yes,
isn't this stuff being taught in public schools? I mean, we know that it would save us trillions
yes,
of
yes,
dollars,
yes, yes, yes.
and what's different between what I'm doing and what, because the science was all there before. I'm not a scientist. I didn't create any of this science. The only thing that's different between what's been there before and what came, as I was finishing this book and launching this project,
Yeah,
was that I'm the guy who's saying it is insane that we're not doing this already. We could be saving trillions of dollars. I mean, it's so
yeah.
simple. It's so incredibly simple. And so that's me. I'm the guy on the corner that's going, hey, this is nuts. We need to do this.
Yes, choose the simple method. Oh, absolutely. Well,
So what I was trying to do is tie into what you were saying, which
yeah,
is, yeah, we're all able to do amazing things.
yeah.
The more we go here, the more we go to the source and get away
Mm,
from the things of man,
mm, mm.
this is where the magic is going to happen. And you want to, like you were saying, you want to journal these things, because ideas are going to come,
Mhm, mhm,
and the
mhm.
world's going to make you feel like they're not important or valid or whatever. I mean, trust me, I deal with this. I deal with this. I know what it feels like.
Mm,
And so
mm.
you write it down, you create your own validation, and you connect with
Yeah.
people that are in that
Yes.
space. And
Yes.
God knows, that's not my social circle. I have all the same trials and tribulations that everybody does. I doubt myself. I've been in really deep places where I just really didn't have really any faith in the things that I'm talking about right now, even though I had faith in them when I was writing it and creating it, because I didn't realize how the world was going to kind of hit me in the face in different ways.
Yeah.
But this is where we stay true to things. This is where we know where things are really important and what's worth hanging on to and what's worth putting our time into. And it can be little things in our lives, just little things like being compassionate to the person across the counter from us, no matter where we go and what we're doing, because they're dealing with things, just little things like that, just constantly, being that compassion that comes out of that
and
state.
and that to want to go inside heart and mind, and we're also going to include the lower dantian here, so that you are earthed and grounded in that, so that you feel safe to be able to.
Well, and I don't think it's an accident that, before the International Day of Yoga, before the
Yeah.
World Peace Meditation Day, before all that was World Tai Chi Day. World Tai Chi Day was one
Oh,
of the first mass mind body
oh
global
really?
events.
How
And
interesting.
then these other things came later.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was any accident, looking
No.
back, because I've immersed myself in the science of the big five. And I know that yoga
Yeah.
has benefits that Tai Chi and
Yes.
Qigong don't have. It's not an ego thing. I know they all have their own individual benefits that are
Yeah,
really
but they
powerful.
all
But
weave as well.
Tai Chi, the Dantian, the lower Dantian,
Yes.
Tai Chi takes,
Yes.
my Tai Chi teacher talked about this many times. Tai Chi takes, yoga prepares your body to go into the higher states. And that's great. That's a great, cool thing to be able to do. But Tai Chi takes you from the higher states into the grounding in the earth.
The
And so I don't think it was
embodiment.
any accident that World Tai Chi Day
Yes.
sparked these international mass things like this.
Well, this brings in that the embodiment of spirit. It's all great to go up and be in that realm, but actually we do have bodies and we can walk around the world, and it is the embodiment of our light that is bringing
Mm-hmm.
more of that through. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that is it, combining with other people that are doing similar things, and weaving, and it's all part of the same energy pattern matrix that we're building
Yeah.
here. And it's not one better than the other. It's like, how does it feel today? How are you in your energy
Yeah.
field? How are you with your practice? And I think that's
Yeah.
becoming more, and people who do yoga and qigong, they have a great time with it.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
get, yeah, which is beautiful thing. And as you
What?
say, like tai Chi from a Qigong perspective is super interesting and
Mm-hmm.
really
Yeah.
deep. And
Oh yeah,
so,
it takes Tai Chi to a whole other level, if
totally.
Qigong's a part of it. But I feel like I was being prepared for, this task of creating a sisterhood of mind body practices. Because when we were organizing World Tai Chi Day, at first when I had the vision, it was World Tai Chi Day,
Yeah.
because that's what I did, Tai Chi. But then very quickly, I shared this vision with the World Congress on Qigong and the National Qigong Association, and they said, "Bill, this really needs to be World Tai Chi and Qigong Day." And
Exactly. Already
so
unifying them.
immediately I saw the wisdom in that, because
Yeah.
I had, my Tai Chi was Qigong. That's just how I was
Yeah.
brought up, through Tai Chi. So it was no brainer. And then I wanted to be inclusive. So I brought them in. And then I got complaints from Tai Chi people that said, wait a minute, you know what I mean? And so then when I started, after it became World Tai Chi and Qigong Day, and then I started including in our newsletters science on yoga or meditation or mindfulness, I'd get emails and go, hey, wait a minute, but I realized, no, we're all one sisterhood of the 8 hertz
Exactly.
alpha brainwave state.
Thank
That's
you.
what we all have in common, and we get there in different ways, and each one has its own
Exactly.
beautiful aspects, but we're a sisterhood, and that's where our power comes from. If we could get John Kabat-Zinn and the TM Foundation, who's the David Lynch, Russell Brand, if we can get these mind body folks
Yeah.
to embrace this, my
Yeah.
God, millions
We're
of people
off.
are going to
They
find out
they
about
they
this
are,
instantly.
and I think also, just to sort of finish up on, I mean, we're talking about days here and days there, but we actually want to be keeping our vibe really high and buoyant as often as possible. If
Yeah.
this is what's going to help do things, hence why your daily practice is important,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And just having a positive vision of the future. And,
Yeah.
and I'll just tell everybody, if you read my book, you'll have a much more positive vision of possibility for the future. Definitely.
So how can people get hold of that then, Bill?
It's on Amazon all over the world.
Okay.
So they can just go to any Amazon site, but they want to do a search for new second edition, 2 Indies, new second edition the gospel of science, and then it should come right up to the top.
Brilliant, brilliant. And of course, the Global Transformation Project, really excited to be following where that's going and
And
everything
that's what
else
the
that
whole
you're
book
doing.
focuses on.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Bill. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
You too. This has been
Yeah.
like medicine for me.
Oh, bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, really, really appreciate you. Ah.